If you're expecting a Tag Tuesday video today, then sorry to disappoint, but we're mixing things up a bit. Ooh! Hi everybody, it's Lydia here. So yeah, mixing up a little bit today. Basically, there was this group created on Goodreads called Tuesday Talks. I will link it all in the description below. And it's kind of a similar idea to Top 5 Wednesday in that every Tuesday there is a topic which you can discuss and talk about on your channel. It was just a really kind of interesting idea, and I like discussion videos and I really enjoy doing them. I try to do them as much as I can, but sometimes it's coming up with the idea of what to talk about. So the fact there is now a group specifically kind of dedicated to coming up with ideas is fantastic. I'm not going to be doing these every Tuesday. I will still be doing tags on Tuesday every now and again, but I thought just to keep it fresh I would kind of mix it with this as well, because there are only so many tags around in the world, so I thought this would kind of allow me to do other videos as well as tags, because I do enjoy doing discussion videos. So yeah, check out the info in the description below. It's a pretty new idea, it's only been going for a few months and there aren't that many people doing it yet, so if it sounds like your thing, go check it out. Today's discussion is, what is your favourite genre and do you put down other genres? And for anyone who watches this channel frequently, you'll know that my favourite genre by far is fantasy. There are multiple reasons for this, but for me, fantasy kind of includes every other genre, and I don't think other genres can do that. Because with fantasy you can have romance and you can have crime and you can have horror and you can have all that in there, but it still comes into the fantasy genre despite all that, and it just keeps it diverse. And I think the best thing as well is that it really showcases how far the imagination can go. And there are kind of only so many books you can read about someone falling in love, or someone being killed and someone trying to solve the murder, or someone trying to succeed in the world. There are only so many of those stories you can read. But in the fantasy genre you can mix things up a bit, change things around, and it'll be a totally different book to every other book, even despite the fact that the plot is pretty similar to others. So it just keeps things really diverse and really interesting, and you just don't know what to expect. Also, I'm just a massive fan of escapism in books, and really I don't think you get escapism in any other genre like you do in fantasy. Probably to some extent sci-fi, but I've just never been a big fan of sci-fi, which I'll talk about in a minute. And in fantasy it's just often a totally different world to the one we're used to and the one we know, and therefore you can just completely escape from the crazy world that you live in, and sometimes it's just nice. Also, world building in fantasy novels is just, it blows my mind when you have a great world builder, because the kind of capacity you have to have in order to create the kind of extensive worlds that some authors have created, it just blows my mind. That is so amazing, and oh my gosh, I love fantasy so much. I could go on about it for days, but I won't. Do I put down other genres? I mentioned this I think in a tag last week or something or other last week, how I'm not a big fan of sci-fi because I just don't find it believable, and I know that's ridiculous when I've just been talking about fantasy, but whatever. I find fantasy is meant to be unbelievable, like anything can happen in a fantasy book, but for some reason, because sci-fi is sort of meant to be set, or often in general set in the future, in a kind of potential reality, for some reason there is a sort of, there has to be a higher level of believability in sci-fi than it does in fantasy. I don't know if that makes sense, but it does in my head. Moving on, other genres that I put down. I tried recently, I tried crime, and that kind of goes two ways for me. I'm not a massive fan of crime genre, whether in film, TV or books anyway, and in books I find I either often guess who it is pretty early on, or it takes so long for it to all unravel that I just get bored, and often the characters are really depressing and dull and I just don't relate to any of them. Maybe I've just read the wrong crime books, because I think honestly a lot of the reason why I don't like crime comes from reading Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn, which I know everyone raves about Gone Girl, and I haven't read that because I read Sharp Objects first, and I hated that book so much. I made myself read the whole thing, but oh my god, I wish I hadn't, because it was so depressing. None of the characters were well written. The whole book was well written. I just didn't enjoy it. Like, when I read a book, I want to get a sense of enjoyment out of it, and oh my god, I really didn't with that. It was so dull and dire, and oh, I really didn't enjoy that book, and I think it has stained the whole crime genre for me as a result. I'm sure there are some fantastic crime books, but for me, no. No, just no, I have to stay away from now on, or at least for a while until I've got over that. Having said all this, I do try to be quite open with any book that I read. I say this because I sound really harsh. I'm sure there are some sci-fi books that I would love. I'm sure there are some crime books I would love. It's just that the overall idea of the genre doesn't appeal to me. And maybe I've just read the wrong books in those genres already. But there we go, what can you do? Anyway, let me know in the description below whether you think I should continue with this. I think it's a really interesting idea, and there are some really interesting topics. There was one last week about prologues and epilogues, which I might do later this week because it's actually a really interesting idea and I'm really annoyed that I missed it. So I might do that later this week on Friday, so ignore the fact that it's a Tuesday talk, but shh. But I think it's a really interesting idea. Let me know below what you think about it, and I will be back tomorrow with a top 5 Wednesday video, and back next Tuesday with who knows. That's the fun of it. Until then, bye!